Well, good morning, everybody, and we want to thank you for joining us for this session on EPDs and what they mean to us. And it's really going to be a bootstraps jump in today as we build them. As you know, CALCIMA has adopted the position that we've got to engage this pretty aggressively as we look at the myriad, and you'll hear more about this from our esteemed panelists, as we look at the mandates coming down, the requirements coming down, and the innovation coming out of our asphalt industries. It's time to engage. The time for delaying or asking, yeah, but what about, is really over. We've got to engage, we've got to embrace, and we'll work on true up as we go through the process of collecting, developing, and utilizing EPDs in our industry moving forward here in California. So in that regard, it's really a pleasure to have these two professionals with us to help us jump in with both feet. We've done a lot of talking about what EPDs are and EPDs in general, but now's the time to act. So with us today, I'm pleased to introduce Leanna Miller with WAP Sustainability. They're a critical member and partner in sustainability, especially in the asphalt world. As it relates to EPDs, they're doing a lot of work with our national association, the National Asphalt Pavement Association. They're a full service sustainability consulting firm, and Leanna brings to us her expertise and experience in life cycle assessment, EPDs, product category rules, the creation of those product category rules, working with industry organizations, working with our public agency partners and companies to meet those goals. And she has a special interest in moving us toward automating those sustainability measures, similar to the way in which we're automating ticketing at some point, right? That's a long-term goal that we need to move forward. And she's one of the creators of Emerald Eco Label, and is currently leading user interface design on the Theta EPD tool. And she's an LCA certified practitioner as well, holding degrees in mechanical and biomedical engineering. So thank you, Leanna, for joining us today. And our second panelist is really one of our most critical partners, and we're grateful that Dominica joins us today. Dominica is the branch chief of the state, this is a mouthful, the statewide materials support branch within the Materials Engineering and Testing Services subdivision in Caltrans, otherwise known as METS. That division, the statewide materials support branch, is working with various groups within Caltrans, excuse me, to implement EPDs on Caltrans projects in line with the Buy Clean Act requirements, as well as the department's goal to lead on climate action. And we're proud to be a partner with them in leading from the industry side to push the embrace of our carbon footprint in construction materials so that we can meet and not jeopardize our ability to get projects funded in California and build them and bid on them. She's been supporting the department since 2016, and she's got a degree in civil engineering from UC Davis. So with that, I'm going to turn it over, Leanna, to you. We do ask, though, if you have questions, pop them into the Q&A function throughout the presentation. We'll get around to Q&A at the end, unless we otherwise interrupt the program on a Q&A item. But please put your Q&A in the Q&A function on your Zoom link. So with that, Leanna, take it away. Thank you for being here.
I am thrilled to be here. Thank you for inviting me to talk on this topic. I am personally really engaged in I strongly believe in making EPDs easier for industry to make, and hence this whole automation push. And we'll talk about that. For now, let me fish around for a second and pull up my presentation. Here we go. Someone will yell at me if you can't see it. Main topic for today is how to get EPDs for asphalt. And I'm going to talk a little bit about aggregate, because you can't talk about asphalt without aggregate. And then I'll briefly mention that other paving material. Few acronyms, it's a whole soup. I think a lot of folks on this call at this point are familiar, but people are coming in all the time to this area. It's a new topic, so I'd like to just cover the basics briefly. So when people say LCA, they say that what they're meaning is life cycle assessment. This is kind of the science behind calculating the impacts associated with a product or a process. In this arena, we're going to talk about products, right? Aggregates, asphalt mixes, and so on. In order to do those calculations, there's this sort of like broad scope of the science of LCA, and we want to cinch that down a little bit to be industry appropriate. The way we do that is we get together in a group and we write product category rules. This is a consensus process. There's LCA experts in the room. There's industry folks in the room. There's upstream and downstream industry folks are often represented. There's sometimes there'll be agency people or NGOs. It's a process, you know, like all committees are, but at the end, we come out with something that is appropriate for your industry. And then the whole point of this is to be able to make an EPD. So if the LCA is kind of the science behind it all, an EPD is the final short form, externally shareable document. And so what an EPD does is it shows the impacts associated with manufacturing of goods. What it doesn't do is reveal anything about your operations specifically. EPDs sometimes get compared to a nutrition label. I think that's a pretty good start. And if you're looking at just the nutrition box, you know, where it says like calories, protein, and so on, skip the ingredient list. We're talking about just the nutrition label. If you look at a nutrition label for a Snickers bar, right, you're gonna know calories, you're gonna know protein, you're not gonna know how to make a Snickers bar. I would say the hot topic right now, unsurprising to anybody, is global warming potential. That is the unit for reporting impacts on our climate. There are other impacts that are given in an EPD, but the one that most people are talking about right now is that GWP number, carbon, embodied carbon, people talk about. In this case, I would kind of compare that to the calorie one. It's the one where people start. So, all right, that was a whole bunch of word salad. What's pushing people to create EPDs? Well, Dominique is going to cover a lot more about the specifics of the state of California, but I wanted to cover a big push that recently happened, which is the Inflation Reduction Act. It passed about a little bit before this time last year, and it funds low carbon purchasing for the FHWA, GSA, FEMA, and HUD. And it also funded the EPA for setting the guidance on that low carbon purchasing, because you have to define what is low carbon. So EPA came around, they put out an interim determination, and GSA took that interim determination and they applied it to asphalt. These are the draft limits. Oops, sorry. I swear, you guys, I'm a pro. Thanks everyone for your patience. All right, these limits here down in the corner, those are the limits for purchasing for the Inflation Reduction Act. What does that mean? There's this 20, 40, and better than average limit. Basically, what EPA said was, okay, we're going to take the average of the total industry, and we're going to compare against the average value. And we're going to say that if you're in the best performing 20%, which is ironically the lowest number for global warming potential, then that's a for sure qualification for the funds. So if you put in an asphalt mix and it comes in at that lowest 20% value, that means that your project can qualify for these funds. Now, not everywhere is there availability of something that meets that limit. So then the EPA said, okay, then you're going to go to the 40%. Okay, so that's at 64.8. The units for this are fun, kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent per metric ton. It's another mouthful. And in some regions, there are not even available mixes that meet that requirement, at which point then, if you can demonstrate that you have a product that meets a better than average limit, then you can qualify for the funds. So sort of this cascading thing. If nobody can hit the 20%, then you can look at the 40%. Nobody can look at the 40%, you can look at better than average. And then after that, who knows? Now, how did they get average? This is where it gets fun. We're going to talk more about the benchmarking effort by NAPA. That's the National Asphalt Pavement Association. I've been very involved with this benchmarking effort. If you are an asphalt producer and you have not participated in this, I'm going to show you how to do it today, and I'm going to strongly encourage you to participate for a number of reasons. Not the least of which, it's free and it's fairly simple, and it means that your benchmark as an industry is more realistic, because the numbers that GSA used comes from the average of existing EPDs, which I don't know about you guys, but if you think about who's going to publish an EPD first, it's going to be the folks that are like, hey, I got this super sustainable product. So I'm going to publish this. And so the results are a bit skewed.
So Leanna, if I can just add support for you in this regard, you know, it's really important. First of all, there's confidentiality wrapped around it, right, to protect your company's interest. But the regionalization of realistic EPD numbers for our markets in California, right, is important. And more data from California production facilities allows our federal partners to fight for regionalization realism or realistic numbers for California. And then as we roll forward, we'll be pushing as well to help Caltrans, our partner, as we regionalize what's available and reasonable in different regions of California because of the availability of different products, right? So I just wanted to throw that in there. This is important because it helps us make sure that we can meet targets. You can meet targets because they're realistic for your market.
Yeah, nailed it. Exactly. So let's talk about how you actually get data in. There's kind of two parts to this topic. I'm going to walk you through the Emerald Eco label for asphalt. And in order to participate in the benchmarking study, you only have to do the first part of it. Like, let's say the whole process is this long, you're doing just this first third. We'll walk through it specifically today. But first, just a little bit about the ecosystem of EPDs. You've got these different ingredients going into products, pavement products. For an asphalt, you're going to have a binder and an aggregate. Now, ideally, you will have specific data about that binder or that aggregate. Like, okay, I have a nutrition label for my aggregate, right? I went to my aggregate producer, they have an EPD, I can put it into my own system and get a more specific number. You could almost think, if we're going back to that idea of the Snickers bar, if gee, this is actually a pretty good one. So let's say that the binder is the chocolate and the aggregate is the peanuts. Then you can use standardized data, which is what most folks have. It's built into the tool. But if you have specific EPDs, you can get an EPD like specifically for the peanuts, right? For the aggregate, or you can use the average. I have no idea why this went all the way to the end. So again, I'm sorry. Thanks for your patience with my hold on 30 seconds while I fix a technical issue. Okay, hopefully we are all seeing my screen again. Sorry about that. Okay, so what we have is this ecosystem of what goes into an EPD and where these all get used. I'm going somewhere with this, I promise, because the next thing is this data feeds into the different pavement materials which are providing EPDs, right? If you're being asked by your state agency or by FHWA to provide an EPD for a product, it's usually at this mix level product. Those EPDs are then, and this is where it gets fun, and you don't have to stress a whole bunch about it, but they go into a number of different databases. Right now, asphalt mix EPDs are all available once they're published, and you choose when to publish. But once they're published, they're available on NAPA's site, and those can then get integrated into your DOT or your customer, whoever that is. And then they're making procurement decisions now at this point based on what they're seeing in the asphalt mix EPDs.
And so, Leanna, just a quick question. You said when they're published, so you can participate in the federal study without publishing.
Oh, yeah.
You can participate. What's our deadline on that?
I
come back to it.
believe that we are closing the second round of data collection. You know what? Let's just say the new year. And if I'm wrong, it'll be after that. There may be a little bit more time after that, but
great. All right. Sorry to distract.
Oh,
but
no,
that
please,
publishing thing is critical. I had several producers that wanted to participate in the data, but weren't ready to publish for whatever their business model reason is, which is always valid, right?
Yeah.
And that's okay. But getting the data in is what's important. They can choose when they want to publish later. So back to you, Leanna.
Totally. Yep. I'm glad you brought that up. There is zero requirement to publish an EPD in order to participate in the benchmarking program. Things you don't have to do for the benchmarking program. You don't have to pay any money. You don't have to even be a NAPA member, and you don't have to publish an EPD. You just have to be an asphalt producer. That's it. That's the requirement. Yeah. So, so now it used to be that in order to get an EPD, you had to go to a consultant like myself, and I had to come visit your facility and take a lot of notes on your facility and then go back and spend a lot of time running some numbers. And then you get out a static report that's good for 5 years, and that's your EPD. Well, as you can imagine, things are evolving a bit more quickly than that. So we started to automate a large portion of that process. It also costs a heck of a lot less than having me come to your facility and do this all as a custom process. So NAPA invested in creating the Emerald Eco Label tool. And why am I from WAP Sustainability talking to you about NAPA? That's because we built it years ago. Under the name of TriSite, if anyone recognizes that name. We joined WAP last year in order to be able to do this with more industries. So I'm very excited about that. I think I mentioned at the start, I really care about automating this stuff and making it easier for industry. So if you want to make an asphalt mix EPD, you can go to the Emerald Eco Label tool, which is at asphaltepd.com, and make an asphalt mix EPD. Now we're doing the same thing, and this is a little teaser. We're going to do the same thing. Yeah, we're releasing it right now for aggregate, and we already do the same thing for concrete for that. Excuse me. Sorry. Let me get my audience right. For that other paving material. But I'm assuming there are some folks in here that are from integrated.
We do have a lot of fully integrated companies. You know, they're heavily and for this webinar, we're focused on asphalt. But several of our companies are in all the above.
Well, cool. If you're in one of those groups, we can work with you on the other side. So about the Emerald Eco Label, it is the tool to make asphalt EPDs. It is sponsored by NAPA. So they invested in this because they want asphalt to be able to make EPDs easily. It's pretty unusual that a association has created a tool, but it was a pretty good move on their part, I think. So So far, this is a snapshot as at the end of the first round of benchmarking data collection. We have 331 plants from 91 organizations and 1,072 mixes. That number has definitely gone up since this was made. Now you can see where we've had participating locations in the benchmarking data. That's this colored map here. So if anybody here is on that Nevada, California-Nevada border, if you have a facility in Nevada, you can see it's gray. We'd really love participation. And now don't get fooled by this dark color on California. It is true that there are more participating locations in California. But you are also a big state with a lot of producers. So we would like to see a higher number of folks from California participating, especially if we want to get sub-state level information. I will point out that we're using for now a fairly simplified climate region, but even with that, the state of California, it straddles 2 climate regions, and that desert east side of California, we don't have a lot of data, so we're looking for more. What is it? It's a user-friendly web-based tool for creating EPDs, and here's the general workflow, and then we're going to see this in the next few slides. But in general, data collection, we're talking about what's going on at your facility. We can even provide, if you go to asphaltepd.com, you can see there is a downloadable Excel sheet that helps you pull in your data. There's a sheet just for benchmarking, so you can do just that sheet for benchmarking, or you can do the whole sheet and get all of your data collection done. You can also, work on data collection as you go once you've gotten into the tool and see what you need. Some folks like to come in with everything ready. Some folks like to get in, poke around a little, and recognize, oh, I gotta do this. I need one more item. I don't know if you're anything like me. I'm that person going to the hardware store 5 times. Like, oh, I need one more bolt. Anyways, get your data together. At any point in this continuum of workflow, you create an account, you define your facilities. So that's kind of the metadata about your operation. You define your products. Oh, and I want to draw a line right here between define your facilities and define your products. Right at define your facilities, that's the line for benchmarking, where past that line, you do not have to enter any more data. You're done. You don't have to define your products. You don't have to create an EPD. That's the benchmarking stopping point. But let's say you're in here to make EPDs. You need to put some information in about your mix design, and then you make an EPD for the mix design you've entered. There are 3 main types of data that you enter at that plant level. And again, this is the items that you enter for benchmarking. We're looking at plant level type things like your electricity use, your fuels, your water, your total production volume, and then a little bit from down here on the number 3, distances to your major quarries. We add that in for benchmarking. Now, the great news about that is nobody can see that data but literally me and one other person. It's me and my colleague. His name is Ben. You can see him. He's in the, I've used his account here to grab this screenshot. So we recognize that this is sensitive data for you. It's operational data. No one can see it but me and Ben, and that we have been doing this for about a decade, where our entire jobs are dealing with other people's sensitive operational data. So we are bound by a whole bunch of NDAs to not discuss it, but also just like, this is like my goal. So I would really not want to screw this up. So all of that data is entered, but it's not revealed in your end EPD or in the benchmarking data, depending on where along the line you stop. Now, if you're going to make an EPD, you're going to want to enter data about your aggregates, your binders, and any additives. So basically the kinds of things that go into your mixes, and then your mix design. How much of everything are you using? And then this specific thing of distances traveled for each mix ingredient. That matters when we're talking about global warming potential. So what we've done in making the Emerald Eco Label is we have done a bunch of iterations on this, simplifying the data input process to make it into terminology that you as an asphalt producer recognize. And using data you pretty much already have about your operation. You know, we're asking you for your fuel use, we're asking you for your energy use. You may have to dig around a little to get last year's numbers, let's say, but these are the kinds of things that you have. You don't have to go out and get a brand new measurement to get most of this put together. And we write it all in terminology that is familiar to you as an industry, and we don't ask any questions that we don't have to. So there's that quote attributed to Einstein about just as simple as can be without being too simple, basically. I'm paraphrasing, but that's the idea, is we're going for that that line of making it as reasonable as possible for you as an industry member, while still getting the appropriate data needed to do all the science behind this. But you do not have to be an LCA expert to do this, right? What you do need to know is asphalt operations, which you guys all know. All right, so a little bit about when we're talking about the benchmarking side, why this big benchmarking effort. A little bit of life cycle terminology for y'all. We've got embodied carbon. This is a term that's been tossed around a lot lately. Okay, cool. This is part of the total life cycle. So if we look at a life cycle of a product, we have its manufacturing, we have its transport, we have its installation or construction, we have its use, maybe some maintenance, more use, and then end of life or recycling, right? Embodied carbon is just the piece involved with the manufacturing. So, and upstream of it. So the ingredients that you use, what it takes to get that stuff to you, and then your production impacts. So they call this cradle to gate, if you've heard that term. That's embodied carbon. It's when it drives out of your gate, that is the level of its embodied carbon. So all the carbon it took to get it to the point where it's heading out your gate. So we can split it up into subphases, A1, A2, A3. A1 is the carbon associated with your ingredients. That's your binder, your aggregate, your additives, and so on. A2 is the transportation piece. This is mostly for asphalt aggregate transport. And we benchmarked this pretty hard because in some states they have really wacky aggregate availability. It turns out in the state of Florida, they just don't have construction quality aggregate. And it's what that was doing was it meant that their A2 numbers were sky high and they weren't able to meet the GSA numbers, but there's just nothing they can do about it. They literally have to drive the aggregate down from Georgia, or this is really gonna be wild to some folks, but they ship it from Nova Scotia. So there's that piece. And then finally, this third piece, which is the part that is sort of two pieces, that's your production piece. And that can be affected, for asphalt at least, by your climate region. You know, if you're in a region with a lot of rainfall, you're going to need to do more drying. That can affect your A3 numbers, right? Your fuel use and so on. And then your general production, your facility efficiency and so on. All of that sums up to make that total embodied carbon number. And we saw that is the number that's being used in those GSA limits. Okay, so we're really, really, really looking to get the best quality data we can to characterize all of this so that we have a better average to start with for agencies and so on as they're looking to use benchmarks. We want to have an actual realistic representation of your industry. So here's an example from the very first round of data collection for asphalt EPDs. You can see we've got a whole bunch of states here. These dotted lines are those GSA numbers. Okay, so this is that average number. This is the 40th and the 20th percentile. Now, the thing is this is the data we currently have about California. You can see it over there on the far side of your screen. That is the data we have. We would like to fill that in and see if that actually represents you as a state or if it is skewed. The more people that participate, the more realistic the representation, the better we are. And just for funsies, you can see Florida. Wow, boy, I can tell you what drives that bar to be so far above all the rest. Florida and Louisiana there, it's because of that transport thing that I mentioned. What you'll also notice is that there's a bunch of states missing. Even some states that in the map you could see had provided data, but they don't appear on this. It's because we have rules internally about when we have fewer than 3 participating organizations in a state, we don't visualize that data so as to protect specific data about an organization. So again, we have these limits in place to make sure that there's not a way that your sensitive data is revealed. Okay. So on to how one actually makes an EPD. We follow this simple linear process of you enter information about your plant, your organization. That's kind of your metadata, right? Your company data, how do we get a hold of you, that sort of thing. And then it goes right into plant, and that's that fuel use, electricity grid, and so on. So all of that plant level data. And then right in that on the far left between that number 2 and number 3, again, that's that line for benchmarking where you don't need to put in any more data after that to participate in the benchmarking. Then you input data about your ingredients, right? We have this very fancily integrated with upstream materials and associated industries. We have averages in place for pretty much all common ingredients. But what we are starting to do is, again, you saw it in that that layout of the EPD ecosystem. We're starting to integrate specific EPDs from specific suppliers. And this is happening over on the concrete side with cement-specific EPDs, right? And they're including the specific cement supplier in order to create EPDs for concrete mix. So now we're doing the same thing over here. There's work happening on the asphalt binder side, and we're doing a lot of work on the aggregate side. You can see here, we've tried as much as possible to make this simplified. You can select if you have additives. There's a long list of additives you can select from, and many folks in the additive world have been working hard to create those additive specific EPDs so that their information is directly integrated into the whole Emerald Eco-Label system. So at the end of this, once you put in your plant data, your ingredient types, you put in the information about your mix, then you can preview your EPD and then choose to publish it. Once you choose to publish it, that EPD is verified. There are additional quality controls within this whole system. Just to reassure you all, there is a lot going on in the back end to make sure that the data falls within normal bounds, that someone can't accidentally fat finger something. There's a lot of sanity checks in this, and then NAPA has a quality control assurance program as well. So there's a hot chance if you publish an EPD, you may have to, most of them are immediately available, but some of them may have to have a small pause while they go through the quality control program.
So
So,
Leanna, let me,
yeah.
if I could, just ask a couple of quick questions, right? So one of the questions we got asked is specific aggregate EPD data. So if you could slip that in as you go forward, that would be great. And then we know that in our industry, the oil industry has been a little bit slow to provide. So if you could address that, I think, you know, at this point or somewhere in this part of your presentation, that'd be great.
Yeah, that is sort of the holy grail of the LCA world, is getting great data from petroleum products. There is a lot of work going on in there. It's imperfect, but what we do have is excellent primary data from the Asphalt Institute. They have provided sort of category data, if you will. So it's not product specific or say terminal specific, but it is far better than just a generalized data set for asphalt binder. So they've made a big investment of creating LCA data for several different major types of asphalt binders, notably SBS modification, and there's a couple of neat binders. So I will say we are all excited to have more data on that. But I am very glad that you brought up the point of aggregate EPDs, because this has been my project for the last 2 years. I'm very excited about it, so I'll talk about that next. But first, I just want to point out a few things about the verification. Verification happens third party. This whole software is verified. It makes sure that all the data entry is simplified and follows the particular PCR. Remember those product category rules that Asphalt put together? That all gets updated every 5 years. So the software, we then go in and we update it all so that it automatically, your EPDs will meet the new PCR requirements. So there is a lot of effort going on to make sure in the background that the quality is there. Now, there's a fun little extra piece on the Emerald Eco label, which is the optimizer. What we saw when we first made this tool was a lot of people were logging in and they weren't publishing EPDs, and instead they were going in, they were changing all their data, because people were really interested to see, you know, okay, if I change my plant over to all natural gas, what does that do to my numbers? Or if I make this mix, but I make this mix with a larger percentage of WAP, what does that do to my numbers? And so what we wanted to do was to separate out the EPD making side of it from the kind of playing with the dial side. And we created this whole optimizer tool. And what it does is it takes all your data about your plant and your mixes and everything, and it puts it into a new sort of sandbox playground side. So your EPDs that you publish are unaffected, and we don't have any problems with data quality or data verification. That bit gets unaffected, but then you can now take your own data and then play with the sliders. You know, what happens if I switch my whole plant over to natural gas? Or here's an example where it's we've changed from 20% WRAP to 40% WRAP. This is a particular mix, just made at the same plant, it's test plant, but for example's sake, very typical mix, and just swapping out part of the binder, a small portion of the binder, and quite a bit of the aggregate for more WRAP makes a big reduction in your global warming potential number per ton of mix. So this is where you can see, okay, you know, what do I need to do with my mixes to meet BiClean requirements? You know, what can I do at my plant operation to help reduce my impact and meet, maybe I have some ESG reporting requirements. All of this is available in the optimizer, and it's all part of the Emerald Eco Label tool. It's going through a revision right now, so that's why it's got this little bit that says beta down at the bottom. Beta means it's in revision. So why do this? Especially why participate in the benchmarking? It's free to you. It's a better picture of your industry. You don't have to be a member. Your data is private. The only person who can see it is myself and Ben. But you are participating in that transparency. A ton of effort has gone into the upstream to make sure that this meets agency recommendations for, say, public data. This is a big thing with agencies. Public data, meaning like those average data sets that we use, say for the binder, or maybe we use some average data sets for transport. Those are all public data instead of a privately owned database. A whole bunch of quality control and confirming that this all meets the product category rules. This is all built into the Emerald Eco Label tool. So I, though, happen to say, I think personally we made this very simple and easy to use, but for some folks, it's still just a lot. If that's you, at WAP Sustainability, we offer a service option for asphalt EPDs to support you in this, a full white glove treatment. We can help you with technical support, data collection, integration with Energy Star, finding mixes that meet GSA thresholds, and so on. So we often find that people have had sort of sustainability tacked onto their title and are pretty swamped. And if that's you, or if you're just thinking this isn't a place you want to go, but you need to make an EPD or you want to participate, you can contact us. We offer that service. So on to aggregate. This I'm super excited about. We are now working to make a full platform that integrates all of these EPDs. So the first new product that we're making EPDs, or I guess the first area that we're making EPDs for using the Theta platform, is aggregate. So this is going to look pretty familiar. Theta tool for aggregates, a user-friendly web-based tool. We learned a lot by building the Emerald Eco Label for Napa. And what we saw was it pays to keep things as simple as possible and in the terminology that your industry is familiar with. So I got to have the great ton of fun of sitting on the aggregate PCR committee. It's been a good time. And working to understand the specific rules governing the creation of EPDs for aggregates. And this is the first time that there's an automated tool for EPDs for aggregates. Otherwise, right now, if you want an aggregate EPD, you have to go pay a consultant. It's expensive and time consuming. But now, instead, you can come into the Theta tool, you define your facility, you put in some information about your products, and you can create EPDs on demand. Simplified data inputs, right? Specific to the aggregate industry. So stuff that is specific to quarries and not a whole lot of extra data entry. We are looking for metadata about your quarry, things like what's your rock type? Are you a bank run or a blast and crush facility? And then this is going to seem really familiar, right? From the asphalt side, grid energy use, fuel use, and then consumables that are specific to your industry. Y'all go through a lot of tires, it turns out, for my aggregate folks on the line. The idea is, this is, again, very familiar, right? You put in the facility information, you put in the data about your products, and you can get out an EPD. What you don't need to do is you don't need to have life cycle assessment expertise. You don't need to provide a third-party review. We've streamlined that as a part of the system. The data is integrated and output into the appropriate systems. for public access to your EPDs, you get to choose when to publish, right? When to make it public. So you can look at your information and think, I don't know if I'm quite ready yet. Reassure yourself that no operational details are revealed, and then you can choose to publish your EPDs. Same thing for concrete. So my friends over on the concrete side, I stole their slides. So, but the idea is just the same, right? Again, putting information about your operation. It's simplified. It's all in terms you know. You get out your results about your mix design, your impacts associated with your mix design in a format that folks are used to seeing. This EPD nutrition label, like right here. I love this image. This kind of gives you an idea of what an EPD sort of looks like, or at least the core part. This is that nutrition label portion of it. Global warming potential per unit of product. This happens to be concrete. I apologize. I should have included an asphalt screenshot as well. So you can find the asphalt EPD tool, the Emerald Eco Label tool at asphaltepd.com, and you can check out the Theta tool for concrete and aggregate. I'm so excited about aggregate at thetaepd.com, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I think we might be going right to Dominica, though. I'm very excited to hear about the Caltrans program for EPDs.
Thank you, Liana. Robert, is that okay if I just head into mine, or was there anything you wanted to do in between?
I'm sorry, I was talking to myself again. So no, I think we're good. Let's go into Dominica, and then we do have a couple of questions in the chat that I think are good to kind of close with, because they're peripheral. What about other materials? What about other additives, et cetera, in this process, right? And where do we stand? So let's do those after we hear from Dominica, because I think she's going to add some context to this, and then we'll wrap back to those Q&As. Sound good, Dominica?
Sounds great. I'm going to share my
Thank
screen now. So as Robert mentioned earlier, my name is Dominica Ercolini. I'm a branch chief for the statewide materials support branch within Caltrans, and I work with quite a few different folks within Caltrans and industry to help implement EPDs onto our projects. And so today I'll be giving you the agency perspective on EPDs. So I'm going to talk about the Buy Clean California Act. I'll talk about our 2019 pilot projects that we did, our involvement in the FHWA Everyday Counts initiative, the FHWA Climate Challenge. I'll talk a little bit about our long-term strategies, and then at the end, I think we'll have an opportunity for questions for both myself and Liana. So, Buy Clean California Act, the reason why I'm bringing this up here is because it's a legislated requirement for Caltrans to collect EPDs for 4 different projects, sorry, materials. And that's carbon steel rebar, structural steel, flat glass, and mineral wool board insulation. This legislation was passed in 2017. It was amended a few times. But what I really wanted to share here, obviously, none of those materials are concrete or asphalt. But what we really liked, we learned a lot throughout the Buy Clean California Act and implementing it. And so one of the few things that we want to take from that is, first of all, their phased approach to implementing. So we didn't go straight from nothing to requiring EPDs. We had a while where we were requesting EPDs because we just wanted to understand where the industry was at that time. Then we slowly transitioned into requiring EPDs. For the Buy Clean California Act, we do have some limits that are involved, some thresholds that we have for those 4 materials. And so The Department of General Services developed that at that point using the EPDs that we collected for those first 2 phases. And then now we're in the current phase, which is we require EPDs. They have to meet that global warming potential limit set by DGS. And it has to be all done before we install the material. What we also did when we were implementing the Buy Clean California Act was we developed both project and material quantity criteria. And so if we're looking at any additional materials, we would do the same exact approach, right? We want for project criteria, the project needs to be $1 million or more for the total bid. It needs to be 175 or more working days. So if you don't meet either of those criteria, then EPDs are not required for that project. We also have quantity criteria. So if you met the project criteria, now we're looking at your quantities of the material. And so you can see for carbon steel rebar, EPDs aren't required until you're over 20,000 pounds of material from a mill. For structural steel, it's 5,000 pounds. And so how we came up with those limits, we were basically trying to balance the cost of the material, the cost of developing an EPD, how long it takes to develop an EPD. And we were also trying to make sure that we're collecting data for the vast majority of projects and material that's going into Caltrans. And so to give you kind of an idea of like what this means, right? What we had about since July of 2022, we've awarded over 700 projects. Of those projects, just based on the project criteria alone, about 500 of them were removed from the requirement because we have a lot of small projects. And so this allowed us a way of, let's not worry about those. Let's worry about the 200 projects that we have that use a lot of this material, where we're going to capture a lot of this quantity. Robert, I see you got off that you showed your camera, so I don't know if you had a question coming.
Right. Well, if I could just provide a little clarification, right? Help me clarify. These 4 are specifically listed in statute under Buy Clean.
Correct.
One of the perceptions that's out there that I most often get asked about is there's a perception that asphalt's way behind in engaging carbon, when that couldn't be further from the truth. But it's one more reason why we need to giddy up, right, on the asphalt side and start producing and providing, is because the perception, because it hasn't had the optics, is that we're behind on the work that we're doing. And all the producers on this certainly call know, they helped us push the WAP bill and other things that are all part of our carbon approach, right? That's the reason we need to giddy up. So I just thought here was the right place to point that out, that we, and we're glad to have you, Dominica, where you are, because you get that and you're a great partner to help us do that. So I was just adding that point right now before you got too far in. Otherwise, it's going to show up in the chat.
Thank you, Robert. All right. So like I said, those materials aren't asphalt or concrete, but we like the approach. And so as we're looking at additional materials that we're adding, not legislated, just as a department looking to implement EPDs on our projects, we liked those approaches, those things we felt were successful, and we would like to continue that for any new materials that we incorporate into our projects. Another thing that we would continue to incorporate or use from what we learned in the Buy Clean California Act is our data collection system. We use, for those that aren't familiar, we have a database, an online database called DIME. And so that is where we currently collect all of our EPD data. And there's really 2 times that a fabricator would go into the system. One, to input the EPD data, and then the second time would be once they're actually doing quantity. So if they're actually shipping rebar, they put in their quantity and which EPD belongs to that. And so we would continue to do that with any new materials that we add as a requirement in our specifications. So now we get into our 2019 pilot projects. And so in 2019, we did 7 materials. We did the structural steel, carbon steel rebar, mineral wool board insulation and flat glass, like in the Bike Lane California Act. But then we also added 3 materials: concrete, asphalt, and aggregate. Those were self-piloted materials, and they were selected because they're high volume construction materials. And we also anticipated that if new materials are going to be added to the Bike Lane California Act, that there is a pretty good probability that these one or more of these materials would be the ones selected. And so we wanted to kind of get ahead of the game and kind of figure some things out, pilot it, see what we learned. So we had 7 projects. 3 of them required concrete EPDs, 5 of them required asphalt, and 4 of them required aggregates. And then we, once we completed all those projects, we did a lessons learned. So one of the first ones, data collection, we realized that each EPD can be different, each PCR is different, and so we had to adjust our DIME database systems and interface to make it as easy as possible. And so we had to develop basically special pages for each PCR for each material. We also ran into an issue where we, with the PCRs, we had an EPD, or sorry, a PCR that expired and no new one replaced it for about 3 months, I think it was. And so, you know, we don't really have any kind of agency that oversees the development of these PCRs. And so we're really are subject to making sure that that PCR is up to date. And so we had to figure out what we would do. And essentially what we determined was that if there's no PCR that's currently available, then we're not going to require EPDs for those phases. So if in the future, you know, anyone from this group ends up in that situation, that would be how we would handle it if that happens again. Roles and responsibility. Keep in mind, this is 2019, and so we were in a different phase, but even contractors didn't even know what an EPD was. They didn't know where to find one. And so we realized how important the communication is across the supply chain. So we needed to make sure the contractor knew what they were supposed to do, the subcontractors knew, and the suppliers, as they're the ones that are providing the EPD. And so lots of communication. That's why we come out here to do these talks. That's why we talk on a project by project basis as well. Compliance. You know, for some materials it's easier than others, but making sure that we're verifying and have a system in place of how we verify materials. That what did we get our EPD for? What came to the job site? Is it the same thing? And also constituent materials. Liana had brought this up a little bit in her presentation. This is, keep in mind, this is 2019, but we found that particularly additives that make up mixes, you know, we didn't have a lot of that data. And so it was just missing from the EPDs, but it could have potentially a big impact. And so that was another piece that we realized. And I think industry is making, or has made a lot of strides since then, but I think there's still some room for us there. So now we'll talk about everyday counts. For those of you that are not familiar with EDC 7, FHWA essentially every couple of years, they look and analyze different innovations that are being currently underutilized in the states, and then they they give an opportunity for all the different states to participate in implementing these innovations into their state. And so Caltrans is participating in the EPDs as one of those innovations that we're participating in. And so we basically broke everything down into like 2 categories. We have our Bike Lane California Act. We consider that completely institutionalized as part of our projects. And then we have our non-mandated materials. In this particular case, we're focusing on concrete and asphalt, and we're in the development stage. So that's like current status, where we're at right now. And then these are our goals. And so for the Bicycling California Act, a lot of that is about improving our current processes. For example, we developed an authorized materials list. This is to make our contractors, our construction folks' lives easier. There's a list of all the different materials that meet all the Bicycling California Act requirements, and so they can take a look at that and pick which mill they're going to get their material from. So mostly improvements on the Bicycling California Act materials. And then for our self-piloted concrete and asphalt materials, there's a lot of items there. So we're going to participate in the FHWA Climate Challenge, and I'm going to talk about that more in just a minute. We're looking to develop specification language and how we can incentivize GHG reduction. So the Bicycling California Act has a limit, so it's either like a go, no go. What we're trying to do is how do we encourage the reduction of emissions as opposed to just a go, no go? How can we just encourage financially? And so when we're talking about incentives, how can we encourage that? And so we're looking at developing some draft specifications, kind of figure out how we can go about that. We also want to encourage the use of facility-specific raw material data. So, we're talking about where does your aggregate come from? Where does your cement come from? Where does your binder come from? If you have specific EPDs or those suppliers have specific EPDs, that's what we're really trying to encourage, the downstream materials. We want to support smaller businesses. That's going to be primarily through outreach and education. And also the last bullet on mine, which is I think the biggest one from this slide, if you take anything from it, our department is looking, has set a goal to incorporate concrete and asphalt EPD requirements into our specifications by July 2025. So keep that in mind as I transition over to FHWA Climate Challenge. So for the FHWA Climate Challenge, FHWA essentially gave an opportunity for all the different states to propose projects and get funding for those projects, assuming that they're accepted. The FHWA goal through this was to quantify greenhouse gas emissions from materials and practices for the design, construction, and maintenance of pavements. And so they kind of gave us like a blank opportunity to come up with different projects. And essentially what we came up with was a pilot program where we would provide concrete and asphalt plants access to financial incentives for the preparation of EPDs. So we were given $312,000. We did outreach via surveys through our partners, CalAPA and CALCIMA, particularly through PMPC. That's where we do a lot of our outreach with our industry members. And through those surveys, we were able to establish our requirements. We're currently in the testing phase, and I think I saw one of our folks that are participating on the call, so I'm happy to see him here. And so we'll hopefully soon we'll be officially launching. Right now, we're just trying to make sure that we get all the different steps that go through the purchasing process completed before we truly launch in early November. So very soon, in the next few weeks, if not in the next couple of weeks, by the end of November, I think we're fairly comfortable saying that we'll be able to do that. So what is the pilot program that Caltrans is doing? Essentially, what we'd like to do is reimburse the different plants, concrete and asphalt plants, for producing EPDs. And this is a partial reimbursement. This is not going to cover the whole cost of what it takes to develop an EPD, but per plant, we're looking to reimburse $1,500 for developing an EPD. There are going to be some requirements that are attached to that, and I'll go over those in just a minute. But you can do up to 3 companies per material. And when I say material, I mean concrete or asphalt. So you can do 3 plants for concrete. And then if you also have asphalt operations, you can do 3 plants for asphalt as well for a total of $9,000 of reimbursement. So this is like a high level summary of the process. Step 1 is to sign up. Once we launch, we're going to have a link on our website where you can sign up. And this is what basically allots you, or has the department take those funds of however many companies, or sorry, however many plants you're looking to develop EPDs. Will hold those funds aside for you for 6 months to give you time to develop your EPDs. We do understand that depending on where your company is at in developing these EPDs and collecting data, it may take you a full year to do this. So if you're one of those companies that are in that position, we just ask that you communicate with us, and we can figure out how to go about it. And then step 3, this is where you've already developed your EPD. So you would submit your EPD data. You would email a PDF of your EPD and your mix design. There's some additional forms here that are in regards specifically to our purchasing process, and then providing us an invoice for the $1,500, $3,000, or $4,500, depending on how many facilities you're submitting for. The general requirements here, it needs to be a cradle to gate type 3 EPD. It needs to be product and facility specific. And your company or your facility needs to be on our Caltrans NPQP list. The mix needs to be previously used on a Caltrans project. We're really looking to collect EPDs for Caltrans materials. That's why we have this requirement. Has to be developed to the latest PCR, which I think if you're using one of those tools, all those tools use the latest PCR when they're doing that. It needs to be third-party verified, and the EPD date of issue must be on or after April 1st of 2023. We made that requirement because that's when we started to talk about this pilot program. There's a few additional requirements. So those were all pretty typical EPD requirements. What we're kind of doing special here is that we want to understand what the source of the binder or cement data is in your EPD. And what we mean by that is that, did you use an industry average, or did you use a specific EPD from a specific vendor? So we just want to understand what you're using for that. We also want your mix design. Just to note here, this is not something that we are sharing or is going to be publicly available. This is for our own internal information to see what kind of what your mix design is versus what kind of global warming potential impact you have there. And like I said, we're not sharing that information outside of the department. And then because we have certain obligations by when we need to spend the funds, we would need all of everything submitted to us by December 31st of 2024. I wanted to share our long-term strategy. Primarily what I wanted to share out of this, right? So we're in the EPD collection stage for concrete and asphalt. We want to take a look at, we have here that's to develop the methodology for concrete and asphalt global warming potential limits. But like I said, we're not really trying to shoot for global warming potential limits. What we're trying to do is understand the data so that we can go towards more of an incentive approach. But we need to understand the data before we can go towards that approach. And then pretty much everything else on this list here is towards a life cycle assessment approach. And so a lot of this EPD data that we're collecting, we want to eventually get to a point of we're looking at the whole life cycle of the material that, as you can see, goes all the way out from 2025 to 2029. There's a lot of steps and a lot of things that we need to do before we get there. So key takeaways. The department plans on taking the same strategies that we did with Biking California Act for asphalt and concrete. We have our FHWA Climate Challenge that we plan on launching here in the during this month. Caltrans has established a long-term strategy, and everyone plays a role in the successful implementation of this. As Robert mentioned earlier, it's going to take everybody involved in this. So Robert, I think I took more time than I was probably supposed to, but at this point, I'll leave it up to you. Questions, whatever you want to do. Thank you. Robert, I don't know if you're on mute.
So I am. So we have a handful of questions that I think, you know, will help us really wrap around a couple of the outstanding questions on this. Would you guys like me to, you know, the first one was, you want me to just jump in? So and again, I can't emphasize enough, the political perception is that we're behind. Our goal at CALCIMA is to help us reconcile that with reality and help folks understand that not only are we not behind, but independently, we've done a tremendous amount of innovation. And prior to any mandate, it's good for us to get in front of this. One of the questions that often comes up, and I think I was sharing this with Leanne and Dominica before the call, was, you know, there are those that can express a lot of concerns, but we need to get in motion and make sure that we have a mechanism to address those concerns. Our support last year for the legislation, you know, and our support for that was that it would have put a lot of the details on the back end that we could reconcile through maybe the PMPC, right? Which is a partnership between Caltrans and the industry, so that as we identify some of those particulars, somebody like Dominica, who's heavily engaged in all of these discussions, and Leanna, as a member of industry, can help us reconcile and true those things up. So as we jump into that, many of these questions kind of speak to those issues. So additive suppliers such as liquid air strip, anti-strip, crumb rubber, right? Is there a mechanism for those yet? Or what are your thoughts on how we address, right, as we increase rubber, as we look at putting other materials into asphalt because we can't seem to recycle them elsewhere? What are your thoughts on that, colleagues?
I'll take a stab at that first. Ground tire rubber, especially, I know there is a specific effort right now to gather data and include it into the kind of upstream supply data for asphalt EPDs. We know that's a gap. It's a pretty good sized one. It's an important one. So there is an ongoing effort right now on that. Other additives as well. What we've seen is that the additive manufacturers have been pretty involved. It does take a little time to make an EPD the very first time for an industry or for a company. I do want to hop in there because I did see there was a question about how long it takes to make an asphalt EPD from scratch. And I would say if you have your data together, because there's kind of two different things going on. First is if you're an additive supplier, there isn't a tool for you to use, so it takes longer. You know, it's just not as well established. If you're an asphalt producer, I have watched a person who is sort of this kind of internet user, and it took him an afternoon, just one afternoon. If you're a little bit more than this, I've seen somebody go from nothing to an EPD in an hour. So somewhere in that realm.
Dominica, anything on that, or you want me to keep moving?
No, keep moving, I think.
All right, and if anybody wants to follow the Q&A, if you're looking at it, we'll just take them in order. I know it's going to jump around a bit. Tony did let us know that the Napa tool, and you can go to Napa's website and go to the search bar and go to EPDs, but Napa is going to reopen data collection benchmarking on November 6th and run it through January 8th. So for all of our members on the call, you'll be getting all that data from us as it opens. We'll keep that information chain going. Next up, background data. Federal Commons database for background data, somebody's concern that it may not have been critically reviewed to date. Any thoughts on that? I don't have any myself.
I would say that the federal LCA Commons is the best publicly available data set we have. I would also characterize the electricity data set as the very best out there. And that all of the data that goes into the asphalt EPD tool is subjected to the ACLCA guidance for data sets. ACLCA is the American Center for Life Cycle Assessment. It's sort of the association for life cycle people. It's like ASME or I'm gonna get the civil engineering one wrong. I'm sorry. But it's like CALCIMA, if you will, for LCA folks. We have a guidance on data set quality. As much as possible, though, we are trying to fill in those averages with specific data for, especially for things like material ingredients, your additives, your ground tire rubber, your aggregates, and so on. Hopefully, in the end, we will just be relying on the federal LCA Commons for things like the electricity data, like the grid, US grid information, and perhaps some fuel information. That's the end goal. It's not perfect yet, but it's what we're all working towards.
Okay, there's another question in here about rubber and additives and the drop-down menu. I assume you're smiling, so I assume you know where that's going. Right now, there's nothing in the drop-down that adequately describes the rubber used in rubberized hot mix.
Yeah, totally. That's why there's this big effort to get better data, is because we don't have a good thing to put in there. And so the ground tire rubber industry is working on getting their data together to improve this. Yeah, in order to fill that data gap.
And we do have a lot of members that are doing an awful lot of rubberized product, right? For Caltrans spec, et cetera. So we know that's a big issue. Terminal supplier EPDs for binder, are they going to be required in the future?
That is an open question if they're required. That we are working with the best data we have right now. As I mentioned, getting really specific data about petroleum products is the holy grail of the LCA world. It is a bit tougher than some other materials. For now, we do not have terminal specific EPDs. So what we do have is average EPDs for neat binder and SBS modified, and then we can include other additives like your anti-strip and so on, even some binder additives at the EPD tool.
Yeah, and then rejuvenating agents. We do know that some rejuvenating agents, right, have no EPD, and numbers would look different. Thoughts on how we're accommodating that going forward? And hopefully this is informative for you, Dominica, as you're trying to do your work, right? I mean, we've got to work with what we've got as we're pushing for all of our additives to get up to speed. But any comments on rejuvenating agents and their contribution to EPDs?
Yeah, I'm going to take this one and run for a second. So one of the big tough things about benchmarking asphalt or having an average value for an asphalt mixture is that asphalt mixtures vary widely based on their use, right? Widely. Depending on if you need anti-strip properties, if you are or are not locally allowed to use WAP, what the limits are on that, and so on. So there's a lot of things that can greatly affect your number. And remember, I had a slide that showed A1, A2, A3, and I said A1 is from your mix, from your material selections. A2 is that transport piece. And basically, if you're Florida or Louisiana, it's really a big deal. For the rest of the country, it's not. We can kind of say, well, we've got other places to focus our efforts. And then the third part, A3, that's your kind of climate-driven effects on your production and just your production efficiency. So what we've done is we've benchmarked the A3 part using that benchmarking data by climate region. We've benchmarked that transport piece. And then there's this mix piece that can have a huge impact. And so what we are doing is we are working hard to include a linear equation, basically, that uses the same data that goes into an EPD and can calculate what that part should be for a mix based on the requirements for that mix. So instead of saying, okay, the limit's just 76 kilograms of carbon dioxide, you can say, okay, well, regionally, we know there's this variation for A3 and this variation for A2. And then we can say, okay, regionally, we require 1% hydrated lime. Very useful in a lot of situations, but can affect your global warming potential numbers. So what we want to do is to have a method to incorporate that into the calculation of a benchmark for a mix. So that's the part that makes it mix specific. We add up the bit that's for your region, we add up the bit that's for your transport, and then we can say, okay, well, we know if you have this much aggregate and this much binder and this much hydrated lime, that you will have, using the same exact data set used to calculate the EPDs, you will have this many kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent per metric ton of asphalt. And so then what that does is it separates it out. Instead of just saying like, oh, you're above the limit, it says, okay, well, you as a production facility and with your quarry distances, you're fine. But this mix design, it puts it above the GSA limit. And then you can have a conversation that says, well, okay, hey, you know, maybe we should reconsider allowing a lower WAP content, or maybe we should reconsider this portion of the threshold. It's that way it's not all on the producer when you don't get to specify sometimes the mix design or some elements of the mix design. So really working hard to separate that out.
So,
Yeah.
and our members can reach out to you to dig a little deeper in that. We're going to run out of time here in just a minute. Dominica, there is a question in here for you, and that is, will EPDs need to be published to meet Caltrans requirements, right? Some members would like to provide you an EPD that may or may not have been quote unquote published. So I don't understand where that line is. Can you help us a little bit with that?
Absolutely. So, and then I heard Liana mention that for FHWA, you didn't have to publish. For Caltrans, you do have to publicly publish your EPD.
Okay. So, you know, that's going to apply ubiquitously across the board at some point, right?
Yeah.
So it's coming, right? All the more reason to fight hard to create as opposed to fight against. All the more reason to fight hard to create a predictable path forward that allows us to work through this process and get in front of it and make sure we represent asphalt well. I do know there's a question in here about distance traveled. We're going to continue to hammer away on distance matters because it does. You know, somebody hauling it 50 miles versus somebody hauling a finished product 5 miles. There's a difference. You know, it's not realistic to think that we're going to have electric trucks in tomorrow anyway. Certainly in my kid's lifetime, maybe, but not tomorrow, as much as we'd love it, or maybe the state would love it. That's a better way to say it. You know, distance matters. So we're going to have to reconcile that. That's going to definitely be something that we grapple with. Time for one last question, and that is, you mentioned 2 products that are coming that you're incubating. One is aggregates, right? And the other one, when are they going to be live, and are they accessible to people if they reach out to you?
Yep. Concrete is live right now. I think hopefully everybody caught that asphalt is and has been live for a long time. Concrete actually.
And you don't have, hang on, and you don't have to be a member of NAPA to go on the NAPA EPD website and use the tool. I want to clarify. They
That's
made
right.
that choice for all of us because they know, you know, at this point it's about industry leadership. So you can get on there without a membership and you can get working on looking at your numbers before you publish and make a decision before you publish. And all that's confidential. But what about the other products?
Yep, so you can make an EPD for concrete through us at WAP Sustainability. You may recognize the tool. It's actually what we built for Athena some number of years ago, but it's now being ported over to WAP and into our Theta platform. So concrete has been out there for a long time and is now going at thetaepd.com. Aggregate goes live on the 4th of December. We had a very successful beta test. Thank you if anyone here participated in that. Very, very helpful. And yeah, live in a month.
And we'll have one of these for aggregate specific, maybe. What do you think, Leanna?
I would love to talk about aggregates.
Okay, so when you get live, right, we'll do that. Dominique, let me just, as we move toward a close, Dominica, let me just turn to you if I may, right? What do you wish, right? What would you like as we're trying to grapple with moving forward and leading? What guiding words, supportive words can you offer to our members as we look forward?
Yeah, so I mean, if you took nothing away from what I mentioned earlier, we're heading towards requiring EPDs for asphalt and concrete in July of 2025. Take the opportunity to at least get a partial reimbursement through this FHWA Climate Challenge pilot program that we're doing. And what that will allow you to do the hard part now of like collecting your data. Liana, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of these platforms, right, you're paying per your plant, and then you can do as many mixes that you want. We're just trying to push you into getting that first EPD for your plant so that by the time July 2025 comes by, when we incorporate into our specifications, you're ready to go. When the contractor starts looking around for a plant where they can get their material from, you'll be able to say, hey, whatever mix you need, we already have our stuff ready to go. So that would be my recommendation, my hope from this.
And so let me ask you two questions, Dominica. One, are you guys going after some of these grant funds? How can we help? And two, are you convening a group from industry, or maybe we'd like you to, right, that we're all sitting around a room talking about some of the barriers to this so we can resolve them?
Yeah, so to your first question, and I think I saw it in the chat too about the EPA grant. We are talking about it as far as what kind of project, what are we proposing potentially, whether it's my group or someone else's group within Caltrans, but we are looking at that and would like to take advantage of some of those funds that are available. As far as the discussions with industry, so PMPC is the big one. That's what we're using. That's what, that's how we even got our test subject that we're doing our pilot through, was through our industry partners, through PMPC. That's where we're doing a lot of our communication. And I've heard some talks that maybe they'll even try to make a more formalized group through PMPC, but we'll see. But either way, regardless whether they do that or not, my group is communicating through PMPC. That's the best way where we can all sit down and chat and figure out how we can get past these roadblocks.
And we would love to help, right? We will bring our professional staff here as well as the experts within industry, right? We'd love to help you both go after grants as well as make sure we're having this discussion, because we've got to lead, folks. We've got to lead on this issue or fall prey to it, right? And with all the work that I know our companies are already doing, our producers in this industry segment are already doing, it's ripe for our leadership because you're already doing stuff. I toured a plant that had so many process improvements and they were all about efficiently running the plant, but I'm seeing in my mind, right, the carbon being deducted from the bottom line for each of these efficiency operations that they adopted. You can see the carbon dropping just in your mind's eye, even though they were just purely because of the innovation of efficiency. So any last words, Liana?
I look forward to seeing everybody next week.
That's right. You'll be at conference. Again, WAP is a member. Caltrans is our certainly our strategic partner, in addition to being our customer, but our partner in making all this stuff happen. PMPC, a great tool. Both Charlie and Tony on the asphalt side are extremely active, along with several executives within our companies. If you're interested in getting involved in the PMPC, reach out on asphalt to Tony and make sure you're on Tony's technical email list. And we look forward to seeing everybody, as you said, next week at the conference. Thanks, everyone.